Daisy is a diesel rail car that thinks very highly of herself. Every day she swanks up and down the line, boasting how she's highly sprung and bang up to date. This boasting often annoys the other engines. One morning, Daisy was taking on more diesel fuel at Knapford. James pulled up beside her. "You know, James," she began, "it does get rather tiresome being so splendid all the time. You barely have enough time for yourself." "Fishing for compliments again?" James sniffed. "I'd be careful. Some would say that's a bad habit." "Pah!" Daisy snorted. "Like you're one to talk, always going on about your paintwork. Meanwhile, I have something to brag about. I'm the latest up-to-date diesel. Give or take 30 years, James smirked. Just then, the two engines saw a new Railtours train pull into the station. James and Daisy were amazed. The engine was painted bright orange with silver letters and trim, which glistened in the sunlight. "Who is that?" Daisy wondered. "Obviously she's here for Railtours," James whispered. "I know that," grumbled Daisy. "Well, are you two going to just sit there gawking at me from behind, or are you going to come up here for a better view?" The engines jumped. They didn't realize the engine was watching them. They went up to say hello. "Sorry about that. I'm James." "And I'm Daisy." "Charmed, I'm sure," the engine said slyly. "I'm Southern Pacific 4449. My public calls me Daylight, after the train I used to pull." "We were just admiring your lovely paintwork," Daisy added. "Oh, that's no surprise, darling," Daylight scoffed. "I turn heads wherever I go. It doesn't matter what I'm doing or where I go. There's always someone who wants to shine in the brilliance of daylight." She was right. The passengers had soon gathered around to marvel at her. Even the station staff went to take a look. James and Daisy were impressed and a little bit jealous. Later that day, Daisy had stopped at a station when Ryan pulled up with some trucks. "Daisy," said Ryan, "have you seen that new Railtours engine Daylight? She's a beauty." "I have," huffed Daisy, feeling rather offended. "What's the matter, Daisy?" "I'm worried, Ryan," said Daisy. "She's unlike any engine I've ever seen. Why, everyone will soon be more interested in seeing her than me." "She'll only be here for a few days," said Ryan. "It's not like she's going to live here from now on." "Don't even put that thought into my head," Daisy winced. "Ooh, I'm simply green with envy." "But aren't you already green?" Daisy sighed. "I just hope James isn't feeling too discouraged." Meanwhile, James had arrived at Knapford with some coaches. He slid into the station. "Here's James," he announced grandly, but there was no one there to greet him. Usually, the passengers would look and admire him, but everyone seemed to have their attention on Daylight. James went as red as his coat. "That does it," he fumed. He stormed over to Daylight. "Now listen here, you... "Oh, honey, you can call me whatever you like." "I can tolerate many things on this railway," James huffed, "but when it comes to taking my passengers away from my splendidness, that's where I draw the line." Daylight stared. "Is it really not obvious to you?" she said. "You shouldn't be surprised that they'd leave you. I mean, look at you. You're a relic compared to me." James stammered. A relic? "Remember what I said, baby. Everyone wants to shine in the brilliance of daylight." James was so cross that his safety valve nearly burst. He huffed away, muttering under his breath. That night in the sheds, both James and Daisy complained to the others. "That Daylight is so full of herself," James seethed. "Who does she think she is, calling me a relic? And taking our passengers," added Daisy. "It's as if they've forgotten we existed. And she's always talking about how shining and splendid she is," agreed James. "How could anyone tolerate having such an engine on their railway?" The other engines silently agreed that the irony was lost on them. The next day, Daylight was simmering happily in the yard as her Railtour train was being prepared. She was suddenly interrupted by a line of coal trucks bumping into her. "Ouch!" she exclaimed. "Sorry," said Neville. "I didn't see you." "Move these out of my way," Daylight huffed. "They're blocking my view." "I would," Neville said, "but I'm needed at the quarry for an urgent load. Goodbye." And Neville trundled away happily. Daylight seethed. "Come along, Daylight," said her driver. "Let's get you coupled up." "But what about these filthy trucks?" Daylight protested. "I can't get my coaches with them in the way." "We'll just have to move them then." Daylight was furious. "What do I look like, a freight engine? I am not touching these trucks." It was nearly time for the Railtour train to head off. The passengers began to complain. They thought Daylight would never move. Just then, Daisy pulled up. "Daylight," she said, "isn't your train due out soon? You shouldn't keep your passengers waiting." "I would be off and on my way, darling," huffed Daylight, "but I simply refuse to touch these disgusting trucks." "Oh, come now," Daisy insisted. "That won't do at all. But I suppose if you won't move these trucks, I will." So Daisy buffered up to the trucks and pulled them away. Passengers cheered. "See," she remarked, "it isn't as hard as it looks." Daylight said nothing and slunk out of the siding. Later that day, Daisy told James everything that happened. "Well, I suppose the Railtour manager will have some unpleasant words for her," he laughed. "Being splendid all the time is all well and good," Daisy added, "but being a really useful engine is what's most important." "Quite agreed," remarked James.